Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Higher Ed, now expanding to change higher ed as well, kind of encompassing that. For those of you who are joining us after this recording, welcome. Hopefully you can tune in next time live for a chance to win some prizes and stuff. I'm really excited for I'm excited for tonight because I've had a long time to be thinking about the experiences that I had when I was hosting the Higher Ed event, and I don't know how else to say it, but I don't think I can do something other than this right now. I feel like this is something that is just kind of things that we need a space to be able to talk about some of these things that is honestly, I'm not inside higher education and in academia, and kind of, from my parents' basement kind of thing. And it's exciting to be able to be talking about this, this theme of leaving academia with Chris Caterine, who's the author of Leaving Academia, A Practical Guide, which is why we're here today, is to have this interview. Here's how it's going to play out. We're going to have some fun. We're going to bring Chris on. He's going to give himself a little introduction, and we're going to talk about some of his book, the ideas behind it, why he's doing it, all that kind of stuff. And also just, let's admit, just the impeccable timing of this book. And I don't think that Chris planned COVID, I hope. But this is a timely book, and I'm excited to hear Chris talk about it. For those of you who are joining us and haven't kind of read some of the promotions that we're doing with this, we have 2 copies of the book that are available that we're going to be handing out as a raffle at the end of the session today. In order to receive a copy or to receive an entry for the raffle, submit a question for the Q&A. I'm very excited. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. I'm new at this. My name's Eric. It's in that bottom corner. I'm the founder of Higher Ed, and I'm going to bring Chris onto the screen. Let him introduce himself. So Chris, welcome. I'm going to kind of play around with things here and see if it works. There we go. I'll be small so we can get your full presence here. Welcome, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. Like Eric said, I'm Chris Caterine. I'm the author of Leaving Academia, A Practical Guide, which is a project I've been working on for the last 2.5, 3 years. In my day job, I am a communication strategist and proposal writer for a global consulting firm.
Awesome. Okay, I feel like I should start a little bit with just how we met. I was kind of in the throes of trying to figure out planning this event that we're going on in early August, and at the time you were doing some promotions for your book and looking for people to interview, kind of like who are in the process of leaving academia. I was kind of thrown a little bit with COVID, like a lot of people. But I want to say, like, thank you for being a voice throughout this whole process and being able to share your knowledge with me and with everybody who's listening now. It's I think that a lot of people are really struggling right now. I know that I myself, when I was laid off from my university job, I kind of just dove into this depression and this void. And it wasn't until I kind of embraced that I was leaving academia and what that meant, and tried to kind of create a new identity. And I appreciate what you've done in helping me to this point. And so I appreciate that. Thank you so much, man.
I'm so happy that it was able to help.
Yeah, and I think I said this in one of my promos. Like, I feel we're friends now. I hope.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll have parties and stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of get into it. You have a book. It's called Leaving Academia, A Practical Guide. So I'm just going to throw this out there. Why did you decide to leave academia? What was your story? Where did you come from, and where'd you go?
There were really a lot of factors that played into that. I think everybody's journey out of academia is different, and there's never going to be one thing. For me, really, it started when my wife was offered a tenure track job at a university that was an astonishingly bad fit for her and for us as a family. And together we had to really think through why wasn't that a good fit? And she ended up turning down the job and saying no. And one of the things that happened in the course of that is that if you turn down one tenure track job, or your spouse turns down one tenure track job, you start asking yourself, instead of like, how bad does a tenure track job have to be for us to take it? Actually, how good does it have to be for us to uproot ourselves and move someplace different? And we were living in New Orleans at that point, where we still live today. My wife had a renewable job that was not tenure track, but she was happy in. And we really came to see that actually following work anywhere in the country was not really a good fit for us. And the best thing was for me to leave academia and to seek a career in another field.
I don't know. What was that process like of like having that opportunity to stay and to continue, and then saying, yeah, no, I'll pass?
Yeah, that was a really, really difficult few weeks, and it involved her going up for an on-campus interview, me then going up with her for a follow-up when she was actually offered the position. And she knew from the first time she went on campus that it was a bad fit and that she really didn't want the job. So when they offered it, it was already this question of, oh, well, I'm not so sure, but they suggested that they might have a spousal hire for me. This was back in 2015. The job market was still not good in 2015. It's a lot worse now. But once you have an offer like that, you really need to consider it more seriously and say, okay, is this going to work? And so when we went up, it was this constant battle of trying to check to see that our negative experiences were actually tracking with reality. And it was this weird thing, because we kept trying to convince ourselves that all these things that we knew were really bad just were actually maybe okay. And I remember one of them, we're coming from New Orleans, which is this food just paradise. And a woman up there said the restaurant that was best in town was known for its mashed potatoes. And I'm just thinking like, okay, well, hold on. Mashed potatoes are fine, but I actually like a bit more culinary diversity than that. What is going on? It was like these little things that would just kind of chip away and say, do I actually want to live like that? Do I actually want to be a 10-hour drive from my family, knowing that we're in a place where they're unlikely to come all that often, compared to New Orleans, at least? Do I really want to be in a geography where, if that spousal hire doesn't pan out, there's not really a lot of industry for me to make any kind of a jump to? Certainly very few other universities or colleges, not even necessarily a ton of public schools or even private schools where I could have tried to teach. So that really was one of the things that weighed on us, is not just is this a good fit for her, but if I do need to look for something else in a year's time, what does that look like? And yeah, just kind of slowly chipped away at our feelings that a tenure track job was something that you had to say yes to. But man, it was difficult. It was really, really hard. And it did throw us for a loop and led to probably a year and a half reckoning for me before I was really comfortable with the idea of leaving academia. But it started back then in 2015.
Awesome. So I mean, I had another question that we're going to go into, but somebody already asked just like an amazing question, so I'm just going to throw it up on here.
Yeah.
And I'll read it out. This is from Samantha. So she's interested specifically for how, whether your advice is going to be changed by COVID, if at all. And I think this is a really cool question, kind of to be asking, because you and we have left academia in I was like, oh, man, should I take this tenure position or no? Like it was like I was dismissed, right? And so like there's a very different motivation and circumstance for leaving. And so here's that question of like, how does your advice change just given those scenarios?
Yeah, so that's one. So a few weeks ago, I was working on an article for Princeton University Press's ideas page, and it's not out yet, but it will be soon. And I actually addressed just this question of how does my advice change with COVID being what it is and really changing things. And I think really the advice that I have in my book, after I met with Eric and 7 other people to talk about what it's like to change careers right now, what I found is that my advice doesn't actually change all that much. If you buy a copy of the book, hopefully when you buy a copy of the book, you'll see it when I talk about informational interviews, which are meetings that you have with people just to learn about what they do and how they got there, and potentially what you need to do, what skills you need to step into a similar role. A lot of that does focus on arranging meetings, going out for coffee or a drink, picking up the tab if you can, things like that. Obviously, that isn't going to apply during COVID times when everything is virtual, at least in the US. But really, apart from that, the advice doesn't change. It really is all about meeting as many people as you can, figuring out what you think is a viable path for you, and learning how to talk to people in new industries and translate your experience for them in ways that are authentic and convincing, and learning how they speak, what their idiolect is along the way, so that you kind of fit in within that industry before you even start on your first day on the job.
Okay. Yeah, I find that to be, it's encouraging, right? Like in a way that,
I hope so.
That, like that, even though everybody's situations really are very, very different, what essentially, like what you said, the key to kind of, digging your way out, I guess, a way of saying is just meeting people. It's talking with people. I think before COVID, it was a lot more fun. I mean, you got to go out for a coffee or a drink or something like that, and got to like have that face-to-face interaction. But I don't think I would undercut the ability that that someone has to connect with people during COVID. Just as an example, from my perspective of organizing this thing that we've been doing, May, I've held over 100 informational interviews, just of me saying, hey, you seem like a really interesting person, and I want to talk to you about something. Can we get together and can we talk about this? And so I think that there's value in that advice, that it really is about building your own personal community.
And just to add,
yeah, please.
If I could just add to that, I mean, I really was not active on social media when I began this process for myself in 2015, 2016. Since then, I've become more active on LinkedIn, especially, but in the last, I'd say 6 to 9 months, Twitter as well. And Twitter is really unbelievable for this. I mean, you can post something with a couple of hashtags, and before you know it, you can meet 12 or 15 people who are willing to talk to you and give you 30 or 60 minutes of their time, of their life, just to help you out. And everybody knows how bad it is right now. And I think because of that, everybody is willing to help. And like you said, you can set up those 100 meetings very, very quickly. When I was researching that blog post, I think I was able to secure 8 meetings in 48 hours. It was really easy. And people do want to help. And sometimes you just need to ask in a way that is honest and short-winded, and yeah, put it up there and see who comes.
No, yeah, I like that, honest and short-winded. I love that. Okay, so now, so there you are. You've made this decision that you're going to be leaving. We've talked a little bit about these informational interviews, but what are some of the actual steps that you took when you decided to make that jump?
My approach to leaving was really throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what stuck. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I'd gone straight from undergrad into grad school. I had not really considered any careers outside academia. Actually, I'd gone right from high school studying Latin and Greek into being a classics major in college. And so for me, I simply didn't know where to begin. And it started with informational interviews, just talking to people and finding out what they did. But then I started to realize that maybe there were other things I could be doing too. So I started a blog to talk about leaving, in part to declare publicly that I was leaving academia, so I couldn't chicken out and try to go back, for being honest, but also because I knew that I wanted to develop a portfolio of writing that I could show somebody from outside of academia that was still on a subject that I knew, which was the process of leaving and contingent faculty issues. But that was really aimed at a non-academic audience. So I started a blog to do that, and that was one outlet to build skills and start practicing for writing for a different type of audience. I began taking night classes using my tuition waiver. I was still teaching at the time, and as a full-time but term-limited employee, I could take night classes free. So I did that. I took courses in statistics, finance, business law, and management, really just to build some new skills and learn how people in business talked about issues, things that I didn't know before. In the course of doing that, I became friends with my finance professor, who's only 3 years older than me. And he actually got me onto the finance committee of a nonprofit he was the chair of the board for. So all of a sudden I had nonprofit experience. Through an informational interview, somebody else put me in touch with somebody who invited me onto the board of that nonprofit. I was doing a lot of different stuff that was really, like I said, throwing spaghetti at the wall, but just trying to experiment in as many ways as I could to figure out what worked, feel out what I was good at and what I wasn't, and to build new skills. Oh, a friend hired me to write new website copy for his business and help him with some marketing stuff for just a small 2-person software development company that he ran at the time. And, I jumped into that. So I think I was speaking with somebody trying to get a job in his company, and he ended up turning me down. But he said, he looked at my resume. He said, "How do you have 7 things that are X date to present? That doesn't seem like it makes any sense." And I said, "Well, no, it doesn't. But I actually am doing all these things. They might be 4-hour a month commitments, but I'd remade myself very quickly just by doing a lot. And you can still do all of those things right now."
Yeah, I think. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to pull you off the screen and put you back on.
Okay.
Because your sync's off just a little bit, and I'm just going to try to make it better. And there we go. Let's see if that.
Any better?
We'll see.
Lag still?
Yeah, my internet has been so. I mean, this is the downside of connecting via COVID, right? But I think I think this is what I was talking about earlier on a forum on Facebook a little bit, like an hour before I got onto this call. Somebody asked the question of I want to do. I've identified a new career, so now I'm going to go get my bachelor's degree in this thing, and I was like, oh no, no, you already have an advanced degree. The key, what I think, the academic, the higher ed in each of us, I think we want to, the answer is, well, it's more education. That's the answer. That's what we should be doing. And it's, we still need to learn, right? We still, you take night classes, you do these, but what we don't need is another degree, is all of this tuition, dollars going towards a degree. When you ask those hard return on investment questions, when you're considering and doing these things. So going out and really embracing what it is that makes higher education what it is just this passion for learning, and recognize that we are able to exercise that ability outside. And unless the job that you want requires a very, very specific thing, unless the thing that you want to do is very, very specific, I want to be a surgeon because I want to actually cut into people, then go get a degree. But if you just want to work around surgeons, you don't go get a degree. Go find an entry-level job for a year. That's going to be better than going back to school for 4 years. Yeah.
Well, and that leads into this issue that so many academics face, which is that you get out there and you start applying for entry-level positions, and everybody says, "Oh, you're overqualified." And you say, "Okay, well, great. What does that mean? How do I get experience if I don't start at the entry level?" And they won't want to do it. And part of that is that, especially at bigger organizations, if there's a pretty rigid advancement process, they don't want you, if you have a PhD, I think I can safely assume you're at least in your late 20s, early 30s. They really don't want you reporting to somebody who's 25, because it would just be really awkward if you started in an entry-level position. And what you really need to do is be looking for, more often, mid-career positions that play to your strengths. And you need to convince people. So let me take a step back. The reason that they think that you are overqualified is because they view you as a subject matter expert in whatever you studied, and they don't know how to monetize that subject matter expertise. And what you need to do is convince people that you are a generalist who just happened to sharpen his or her or their tools in this certain area, which is your academic discipline. And the reason I like informational interviews so much is that it forces you to practice talking to people in different industries, so you learn how to translate those skills in ways that actually make sense and pitch yourself as a generalist.
Yeah, I love your like where you went with that answer, because it goes into a question that was submitted by Renee from Johannesburg about like how do you convince industry of the value of hiring an academic, and I think that's and again I think it's honestly, I mean, it's practice, because like it's understanding that you need to translate what you do. Like, don't walk into a room and say, well, I have a PhD, ergo give me a great job. Like, it requires a little bit of humility and say, like, I need to be able to translate my value in a way that industry folk can get easily, and not kind of dwelling in that subject matter expert lingo, but kind of like just taking it up a level of abstraction.
Yeah, and Renee's question really depends on what your background is. If you have a degree in the hard sciences and engineering, in something that has more obvious applications, you probably don't need to do as much translating to get people to see the value. If you're in the humanities like I was, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote my dissertation on a narrative epic poem about the civil war between Caesar and Pompey that led to the fall of the Roman Republic. There is no making money on that. It's just not a winning value proposition. I really had to go and convince people that actually the way that I studied that poem, which was to look at how the language of the poem and the narrative shaped the emotions of its audience, would allow me to be a good persuasive writer in another context. And as you can see, what I've done is I've just gone from nitty gritty details that may have lost some of your interest already and went up to a higher level. Instead of describing what I studied, I described how I studied it. And then I try to say why it matters. And if you can kind of jettison the what and focus on the how and the why, you're going to get closer to where you need to be. As long as you remember that different audiences are going to have different definitions of why something matters.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I threw a question on there while you were talking from the audience as well. That like, because your answer, I mean, man, you're just on fire right now. Like you're
I missed the question, so you
no,
might
no,
need to...
no, no, no. Like, you answered it anyway. It was about like specifically about being working in the humanities. And like, what things can you do? Here, I'll put it up there again. This is from Andrea. It says, do you have any advice for someone finishing their PhD in the humanities in the next year and a half, and knowing they need to be game planning now for something other than academia? And I think that what you just said, and I think that humanities folks are going to be, I think, pretty adept at this because of the nature of holistic thinking that's around there. But being able to communicate in a persuasive way about a subject matter that you care about, and then recognizing that you're just feeding that passion, and you're using those skills to hone that passion, just kind of step up or step out and then find a different way, a different career path that
Yeah.
finds that passion, like, and going up that level of abstraction so you can go back down into the concrete in that lingo.
And really, in many ways, I think if you view the whole process of seeking a new career as a research project where you are going out and trying to learn what is the language that people in a different industry use, how do they apply it, what do they value, how do they think, people with humanities backgrounds are very, very good at suspending their own personal beliefs and thinking with the structures of another culture, another language, really getting inside it and kind of simultaneously keeping yourself and that culture as these two divergent entities, but still understanding the one in its own terms. And I think that is a really valuable asset for this whole process, because if you just approach this as a research project and don't think that you need to buy into all of this, but just study it and understand it and opt in when or if you're ready to opt in, it makes it a little bit easier and more familiar, and in many cases more palatable.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Because
Did I get ahead of your next question?
no, because a little bit, like, because I mean, this was the next one from Steven about like how would you, and this is like again kind of going along with this idea of advising leveraging advanced degrees to not appear overqualified. And so I think that's one of the ways that we appear or sound overqualified is not understanding that we should be translating what we're saying. And so what are your thoughts on this? Like, what is something that someone can do, like, while they're constructing this new persona, that they can do it in a way that's not, oh, that person's overqualified, because that's not necessarily the reason.
That is really going to depend on the job you're applying to and the industry you're applying for. And
Mm-hmm.
until I know what that is, it's hard to give specific advice besides what I've already said, which is that you need to stop saying what you do, and you need to strip as much of that out of your resume. And I say resume, not CV, but you need to
Mm-hmm.
strip as much of that out of your resume as possible, so that there's actually very little of what you did and a lot more of your methodology of how you do it, of why it matters.
Mm.
And when academics are looking for experiences that translate over, while I spend a good number of pages in my book talking about research and teaching, which does have an awful lot of transferable experience, more often than not, the place where you're going to find things that look like work to other people are in the so-called service positions, things that you do to volunteer, whether it's organizing a conference, being on a university committee, things like this, supporting a professional organization in some capacity or another. Very often that's the thing that looks like work to other people, right? It's lining people up, it's managing a budget, it's delegating tasks. Those are very often the easiest place you can go to find work that looks like work to other people. And because that stuff doesn't count towards tenure and promotion in any meaningful way, academics tend to take it for table stakes and never actually mention it. And reminding yourself that that work that you do is actual work, it counts as experience, it has value, and other people care, that takes some readjustment of how you think. And this is true of your academic skills too. In classics, the field I was in, I had to know Latin, ancient Greek, English, German, French, Italian, and occasionally read in Spanish and Dutch. And allegedly, I was responsible for knowing the content of scholarship in languages like Hungarian that I had no way to know, or Russian. Um, and yet, nobody in classics ever lists those language on their CV because it's table stakes. And I think you need to sort of teach yourself what is unusual about you that you take for granted because you're already operating in at a very high level in a sector that expects a very high number of qualifications just to play.
Yeah, I think what there are two things that I picked up on that I really enjoyed about that. It was like not so focusing on what you did, like the thing that you produced, but it's focusing on your methodology, like how you got to that point, and it's being able to like a lot of those like task oriented things are what industry folk are going to value, and I think that this is just more of a commentary on academia, I think, and one of the reasons why I'm happy to be leaving academia is that it kind of makes it's for how much work and how much effort that we are expected to put into things for these like for running conferences, for peer reviewing articles, for being active in none of it involves compensation, none of it holds value in academia. Like it's just like, oh yeah, that's, you're expected that because people are so used to operating at that really high level, and just kind of like ignoring what you're doing to maintain that high level of operation. And so being able to really focus on, okay, like, yeah, I did this, but what did I do to do that? And
Yeah.
really focusing on those things right there. And yeah, just those opportunities to find and do that volunteer work. And as you're doing it, like if you're in that position, ask yourself, like, is this something that I'd want to do? And like, what about this thing, organizing a conference, do you love doing?
And to build on that, finding out that you actually hate doing something is really, really useful information.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that there is something that you don't want to spend any more time running down is really, really valuable, because that's one thing that now you don't need to think about ever again if you're leaving academia. If you find out that you really don't like writing a press release after you volunteer to help with communications for a nonprofit, great. You can cut out a whole bunch of jobs, not even apply for them, not think about them, and spend your time doing something else. And really being obsessively reflective about the experience of looking for new work and experimenting and trying new things, and logging what you like and what you don't, so that you can be really aggressive in following the things that you find worthwhile and excite you and that energize you, and cutting off everything else that doesn't, and finding ways to either let somebody else do it, or to delegate it, or just to spend your time in a different way.
Yeah.
I saw a question there for a second, but I missed
yeah,
it.
no. Yeah, this was a commentary from Sammy that's, just kind of adding to the comment to the discussion that, that's why service is devalued in academia. And I think that Sammy like nail on the head. And like I love this idea of figuring out, like, all right, so you did that thing. Did you love it? Because like that's what everybody focuses on. Oh, like, did you love it? Like, what's your passion? What's your passion? But you also like consider, like, like, what are some of the things that you hated about that? Because if that's a job in the job description, you're not going to be happy doing that. So don't apply.
Well, and I
I don't know. What do you think?
I would push back on the whole idea of do what you're passionate about too, because I think that one of the challenges in academia, and one of the big structural and social problems with academia right now, is that people assume that everybody who gets a PhD and wants to become a professor is passionate about their subject. And because you are passionate about your subject, people think that you should be willing to do it for free. And that just isn't true. And I think that the faster you can decouple your work from your passion and pursue things that you're good at and that are energizing, even if they're a means to an end, the sooner you're going to get yourself out of situations where people can play on that really kind of nasty argument to passion to get you to do things, to spend time, to spend labor doing things that you're supposed to care about and want to do for free when it's actual work. And we talked about research, teaching, and service. We left the care work out of things. And I think we all know that women share the bigger portion of that by a long way. That's true in industry as much as it's true in academia. But that's work that's there too, that is invisible and can actually be pointed to when you're applying for jobs as something that is valued, that organizations want people who are good at managing team dynamics. That's a really valuable asset that people who have done more care work than I have can probably do better than I can. And I probably need them there to manage me in many cases and to get paid well for doing it. Right. So I don't say that, again, to be dismissive, but to acknowledge that is a real expenditure of effort and energy and time that I think, Eric, you and I probably have not had to do as much, but it's real.
Yeah. And I think this is, so this is a great comment. This one coming from Samantha, just kind of talking about the value of our time as academics. It's just like I was dealing with a lawyer today, stunned by how the bill for value is every droplet of their time, phone calls and emails, where academics routinely are giving themselves away all of this for free.
So, well, and here's a really good way to think about that. So you should figure out just how much the university is collecting on, or your college is collecting on your labor if you're teaching. Figure out what the university charges for a class, for one student to take one class, and then multiply out your number of students to see how much they're collecting and how much they're paying you. And if they're getting anything more than a multiplier of like 2 or 3, then they are just raking it in. And I include this in my book. But my mom is a CPA, and she sees a lot of salaries and knows kind of what these ratios are like. And I think she said that the number is something like 2 to 3 times or 4 times is just phenomenal in an industry like law or accounting. Like if you're billing out 2 times what you're paying somebody, 3 times what you're paying somebody, that's great. You can't expect to do much better. And I think when I looked at the university I was teaching at before I left academia, it was something like 10 times or 11 times what I was making, and they were just keeping that difference. And I do think that when you start looking at this in really cold economic or financial terms, you start to realize, just how severe that really is.
Yeah, and I think it kind of, and if you go and you ask those questions, then you kind of like get looked at as like, why are you like, don't worry about that. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
like, yo, no, just go organize and be on this committee for free, please. Um, yeah. And I think that if there's one thing that, that I think academics, whether you're leaving academia or not, is to understand the value of your time. I think that that's very important. We're actually, I'm excited. Like we have a panel in the future, coming up about, what people can do actually, like in like the micro level of managing your time, but also like project big terms, as well.
Well, and we had a question a little while ago, which was somebody who had a year and a half left until they're done, right? The question is, what do you do with that time? And I think one of the things that this conversation has led us to is that you need to be really, really aggressive with prioritizing things that can help you and doing a good enough job on things that can't. And that means doing informational interviews so you can meet with people and learn how to talk about what you do. Coincidentally, I think you're going to write a lot faster if you've had to explain to somebody who doesn't know about your research why it matters than if you only talk to people who are deep in the weeds with you. You'll just have greater clarity, so that'll help. You can spend time looking for outside work, volunteering, doing anything. And committee work is unpaid, and I think that isn't right. At the same time, if you have a year and a half left and you find your way onto a committee on your professional society in an area that's interesting to you, that is real experience that you could use or that you could point to in looking for non-academic jobs if that's the way you decide to go in 18 months.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo that, like, what do I do in a year and a half? I just like there are so many things that you can do in a year and a half. Like it's if we understand that our time is valuable, it's amazing what you can accomplish, just really is a mind shift. All right, so let's go. Kind of here's like the next question on our agenda, kind of getting back to the book that you've authored. So, and I think like I think we've seen a lot of threads in the conversation that kind of lead to this. But like, let's ask it explicitly. Like, what was your motivation for writing this book?
In the course of changing careers, I ended up meeting with, I think it was 150 different people through informational interviews over 2.5 years, informational and actual job interviews over 2.5 years. And because I was thinking about these economic issues too, of how much is time actually worth, I started to think about just how many hours people had put towards me changing careers. And if I wanted to try to put a dollar value on that, I never actually did. But if I assume everybody's time is worth $100 an hour, and I multiply that out, we start getting to a really, really expensive, like, social use of time that people donated just for me to leave academia successfully and find a good corporate job. And there was something to me that seemed really selfish about that. And like, why couldn't I try to capture the value that had been invested in me and replicate it out and multiply it out so that it could be continued and carry over for other people? Because it just didn't seem right that all that would go to simply me getting a new job. And so at least one of the reasons why I wrote the book was to try to catch that lightning in a bottle and package it up so that other people coming behind me could save that time, could save that effort. And so the people who gave their time to me could actually see it multiplied out over and over again.
I love that idea of like paying it forward and like capturing the value, and like being able to give it to people in a way that is actionable. But I hope that people heard that what you said, that like, if you assume that everybody's time is worth $100 an hour, I think that we need to understand that that's not a far off number. Like I was like earlier today in one of the informational interviews I was doing today, like we were having a pretty fun, candid conversation, and he was working in his postdoc. He's like, yeah, I was like making about $45,000 a year. I thought, yeah, wow, like I haven't made this kind of money in the past 6 years because of graduate school. Like this is great. And then he shifted into a new position, And he's like, yeah. And I started out at $70,000. I'm like, wow, like now I'm making real money. And then he's like, and then I got my next job. And then I realized what making money meant. And it's just, it's the ability that someone has coming from higher education, and just that the drive that people have, people want that, and they are willing to compensate you for that. I think that like your answer, like the motivation for the book, is very similar to my motivation for trying to build this out, of just helping people establish their own value, sharing that value out, and just building that community in order to make it happen in a way that you don't feel ostracized.
Yeah, and it's funny, you tell that story, and I'm reminded of a story that doesn't actually come up in the book. So this is new, which is great. And I was doing an informational interview with a guy who ran a small consultancy here in New Orleans at the time, and I was really trying to talk my way into some kind of a part-time arrangement. And he said, okay, well, if you can find a client, I can let you work on the project. I'll teach you and I'll get some money out of it. Seemed like a good deal. And I was actually able to find somebody who at least wanted to have an exploratory discussion. He said, before we meet with this guy, we need to talk what you would be compensated, because it gets really messy if we try to have that conversation later. And he said, so what do you think you want to make? And I remember saying, oh God, I have no idea. Sitting there sweating, thinking to myself. And I said, I thought of the biggest number that I thought I could possibly get. I'm like, well, in my head, I thought it had to be like $60,000. And I said, well, I would just want you to pay me what you think somebody with my kind of a background is worth, knowing what the time you'll need to spend to train me. And he said, okay, well, the challenge for me is I wouldn't feel good paying you less than 80. And I don't know that I can swing that financially. And it ended up going no place, because the client didn't really want to spend money on consulting anyway. But that was this eye-opening moment for me, where I was thinking that like $60,000 would be this amazing salary that I could do so much with. And here was this guy telling me that actually my number was off by a third. And that's in a small market like New Orleans. If you're in a bigger city like San Francisco, New York, maybe less so right now, but but those numbers are not far off, and 6 figures is not out of reach.
Yeah, I think that's people need to I think that what people need to understand is that they do have value, and that the time to ask what is my value is not during the interview, right? That's a question that you ask other people who have the job title that you want. Be like, okay, like you feel free to not divulge this, but I don't know, like, how much do you make? Like, how much should I make? Like, don't be afraid to ask those questions, and be aware that not everybody on the receiving end of that question is going to be a nice hearted soul and say, well, I wouldn't, like, I was like, oh, probably, like, I mean, how much, like, if they, like, do your research, like, and understand, like, as you're doing that research in this research project, that part of it is this self-discovery of value, and who you are. Let's,
and
go ahead.
To that point, remember that when you are applying for a job and a company is trying to figure out how much they can pay you, they are doing a very complicated calculation, which says that they need to be able to get more value out of your work than they pay you, so that they can cover all the administrative expenses and benefits and the rest, and make profit on top of that besides. And the more that you can think about what you're really good at, what you can do not just well, but quickly, so that you can start bringing value for that company fast, whatever it is. If you are emphasizing those things and pitching yourself as somebody who has those skills, that's going to help you make the case that they should hire you, because you're already thinking in the terms that they are, which is, how long is it going to take for me to regain my investment on hiring and training this person?
And I think it's very important that we recognize here that higher education has those same calculations, right? But what academia has and what higher education has is a very self-selective, altruistic talent pool. And so you can talk about, like, you can say like, oh yeah, we're going to be doing this. Like, we expect you to be on, so many committees and doing all these things. And we're going to pay you, $50,000 a year while you're teaching 4 classes. Especially that's like, those numbers are going to be even more crazy as we see the job market expanding this as things go out. And it's just, what is different is the frame, like what is different is the language that we use to talk about it. And if we start talking it like people, I feel like academics are like, well, I don't want to talk about return on investment because that means that I'm a corporate slave or something like that, right? But understanding that higher ed, I think, thinks the same way.
Well, but you were joking, but that is the thought, right? Is that I'm a sellout, I'm a corporate slave, whatever it is, and that's just how these calculations get made. And what you need to ask yourself is, what can you do with the benefit you get if you decide to do something that isn't a passion job, that is actually a passion. So one of those nonprofits I mentioned before, I'm still on the board of. And I'm able to advise them much better than I could when I was an academic, because I actually know things about communication strategy now that I didn't know before. And I have a much better salary now, so I can actually afford to support them with a monthly donation in a way that I couldn't. And, do I feel like I'm making the world better in like a metaphysical sense on a day-to-day basis? Not always, but at least, day-to-day work. But I know that once a month that check goes out, and I am. So it's nice.
No, yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's ask this question, a practical question, right? Yeah. What makes, so this is called like leaving academia a practical guide. Like, this is not like just like a crack open a book, like read front to back. Like, what makes it practical?
The way that I've divided up the chapters takes you on this journey that I went through, and most of the other former academics I've spoken with have gone through, which is this moment of existential dread when you realize that you are not going to be a professor anymore. I think most of us end up in academia viewing it as a vocation. And when you lose your faith, as it were, that's really, really hard. So you start out in this moment of dread, and then there's this moment somewhere in the distant future, hopefully not so distant future, where you're deployed in a new job. And so I've divided the book up into 6 chapters. And what I do in each one of those is walk you through what you need to do to get through that mental phase in the process with very actionable steps, whether this is how to do an informational interview, and this is what you should do, whether it's these are places you can look to gain experience or build new skills. This is how you translate your CV into a resume. Even in the final chapter, when you're actually in a new job and you're the academic in industry or in a nonprofit, how do you talk about what you do? I really walk through an awful lot of scenarios just to help you put one foot in front of the other. But the broader frame is so I guess I would say the details of each chapter are very practical in that it will tell you where to plant your foot next, no matter where you are in that process. But the chapter structure and the overall narrative frame is actually emotional, and it deals with the psychological challenges and difficulties, and in some cases triumphs of moving from viewing yourself as an academic to viewing yourself as whatever's going to come next.
Sometimes, like when I'm hearing you, like they're like I feel like so many things just like resonate with me in like just different, like striking different chords. And the thing that you said in that moment was like when you're going through this process, and like it's an emotional experience. Like I'm like in the like I'm in that right now of trying to figure out what do I do. And you use the word when you lose your faith, and I think that this is a comparison that I've been making and talking with people, that the idea of leaving academia is akin to like of leaving a faith, of like leaving a church, like that entire culture. And it is an emotional slog to have to go through that and to deal with that and to grapple with that. And like, how do I still have friends? Do I make new friends? Like, what do I do? And then, so I think it's valuable to have like this, like a practical guy. Like, it's like, okay, like this is this struggle that I'm facing right now. And then this other thing that you said was, I need to know where I have to plant my foot next. And I think that's one of the most important things that I've had to learn in going through this void of this layoff, is figuring out, all right, my next step. Because I think that so much in higher education, it's so like quarter by quarter or semester by semester. And it's like, how do I get to this point? How do I get to this point? And it's like all that you see is like all your work piling up. And rather like you're not seeing past the pile. And it's so much of that pile, I feel is we create ourselves in a lot of ways. Like, and by ourselves, I mean like me as an individual, but then also as an industry of academia, that's something that we do. And so being able to navigate that loss of faith in that culture, and having like a practical, like almost like therapeutic feel, going through it, and like having those practical things to do. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say that this raises the issue that this is still really hard, and I think there's good reason to be optimistic. And the book ends on a positive note, but it, and the book can tell you what to do next at any given step, but you still need to do the work. And academia is a very linear path. You kind of know what that career trajectory looks like. Choosing to go a different way or being forced to go a different way, it's hard. You take on a lot of executive decision making that you maybe didn't need to have before to the same degree, and that is really challenging and daunting. I think that's one of the things that keeps people from exploring non-academic careers earlier than they do in many cases. It's just being daunted by that whole process. But Eric, I remember speaking to you a couple of weeks ago as we were getting ready for this call, and I remember asking if you'd broken through the wall. And what I meant by that is that there's this moment that so many former academics describe, which is that you've been doing informational interviews, you're trying all these new things, and all of a sudden you realize that you don't really know what you're going to be doing in the future, but you've figured out how to talk about yourself enough, you've seen enough options that you stop being afraid. And like, of course, you have concerns about, am I going to be able to pay the bills, take care of myself or my family? That's all real. But there is this moment where all of a sudden you say, well, I don't know what it's going to be, but I know it's going to be something. Mm-hmm. And I remember not wanting to assume that that's where you were, but asking, and at least in that moment you said you were. You may have gone back a little bit, but that's a real thing, and people talk about that. And if you're daunted at the beginning, don't think that you're only going to feel optimistic when you have a job in hand. That isn't really how it goes. You'll start feeling like things are going right when you're identifying strengths that you have that you want to pursue, talking to people in industries that you'd like to work in, and learning how to communicate your value in a way that really resonates with people, in a way that you couldn't do as an academic.
Yeah, I like you saying that kind of is jogging my memory of that question, that moment. And I think, I mean, that's how I started this interview before you came on the screen. Was I just had this moment. I just realized that this is what I'm going to do, and it's not applying to higher education. And I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about that moment when I was like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, it was just like this huge burden that was just lifted. And then I have other burdens like unemployment that are being piled on top of me, but but I'm not dealing with this inevitable rejection that happens in academia when you're seeing how many people are graduating versus how many jobs are available, and just to be able to depersonalize that rejection and realize, what, it's not me. This is a crumbling system. It's been crumbling. I've loved my time here, and I want to move forward, and I want to make it better. but I can't sustain what it is right now. And if and this is why I'm kind of adopting this other idea of change higher ed as well, is that I refuse to just watch what will happen. And I think that a lot of, like, I mean, people are commenting here. Like we have Andrea is, like, saying, like, like, thank you for talking about this. Kristen is saying, facing the void of what's not teaching within higher ed is so daunting. Thank you for explicitly addressing that. And just like this idea that everybody knows that it's a frustrating thing, and nobody's talking about it, right?
Well, and you aren't going to get to that breakthrough point instantly. It's going to come in little steps. And one of the steps on the way to that I mentioned, I think, in my first chapter, and I brought it up earlier, right? In classics, we have to know all these different languages to read scholarship. And I always hated reading German like nothing else. It was just a slog for me. It took forever. And like I could do it well enough, but man, it wasn't pretty. And I remember one day, like, looking for jobs, and like one of the jobs I was applying to was like to be the guy who looks at a car when it's been damaged and assesses like how much it's going to cost for the shop to fix it, which was going to actually pay $1,000 more than I got as a professor. And I looked at it, and I said, well, hey, I guess in that job I would never need to read German. And I said, oh my God. I said, if I'm not a professor, I said, it is highly unlikely that I will never need to read German scholarship ever again. And that was like this moment where I'm like, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's going to be okay. Like the one part of my job that I hated the most is actually like, that's off the table too. And so you can look for these smaller victories, smaller silver linings, and don't think it's going to feel good right away, but find the things that can feel good right now and take them, and keep doing the day-to-day work to get to a point where you have some of the bigger epiphanies.
Finding those little joys. I mean, for those of you who are familiar with my story and everything, like now where we are right now, like, I mean, there's a lot of things to be complaining about. But the thing that I have just really latched onto right now, and for all of you who are in higher ed right now, I am sorry, but I am so grateful that I'm not employed at a university right now. Like the amount of stress and heartache and just everything that you are all experiencing right now. I'm sorry. Like, that's so frustrating. And I mean, at least you're not unemployed, right? That's the silver lining, but I think that's important, of finding that silver lining, and saying like, wow, I don't have to deal with that. And that's okay to admit, and to say out loud,
And you can be happy to have the job. And if you've decided it's not what you want to do, give it the minimum level of effort necessary and put all of your time that you regain into doing things that are going to help you find something new. There's this concept called the 80-20 rule, which says that like 80% of the quality comes from the first 20% of the effort. And y'all, if you're leaving academia, it's your senior spring. Put in the 20% and move on. It's good enough.
Yeah, I think that's valid. All right, we're closing up on our session here, and so we're gonna start. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna announce our winners. And we'll also throw on one more question while I'm sifting through the other winner, because we have our one winner picked randomly. This is her question. Vesna, congratulations. Please shoot me an email. We'll figure this out. We'll connect. We'll get you a copy of this book. Congratulations. So it says, we really need these candid conversations about value and salary. Do you have any advice for figuring out one's own finances / practicalities versus passion and enjoyment ratio for a non-academic career? I mean, I don't know if there's an algorithm necessarily, but yeah, what are your thoughts? And congratulations, Vesna. Woo!
Yes, congratulations. Hope you enjoy the book. I mean, that is really the question. And I address that in my second chapter of how you go about figuring out what you actually value. And I think more often than not, what's going to happen is if you decide that you want to be close to family, That's going to lead you to explore certain types of careers that put some things on the table and take other things off. If you decide that you only want to work in the nonprofit sector because you feel strongly about that, then that's going to put certain things on the table and take certain things off. And it's going to change what the salary ratio is. I think really the more that you can figure out what is like number 1 and 2 on that priority list and say, I'm willing to do those things, or I want to be able to do those things, and so I'm willing to accept a bunch of others. That's really how you figure out how that ratio works for you. For me, my wife and I were both ready to have kids. We do have a son now, and we realized that we couldn't do that if we were living apart, and if we only had one academic salary. And so for me, initially I was resistant to working in a corporate job, but I realized that the salary was better, and that would actually enable me to have a house in New Orleans, to have a child, and to support a bunch of nonprofit organizations that I value in my community. And that trade-off works for me. You might decide differently, but again, chapter 2 kind of goes through the things that you might think about, and you just need to figure that out for yourself.
Okay. I like that. Some practical advice. And so let's wrap it up. So congratulations. So it's Vesna Kurlik. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. And also for everybody else, please reach out to Chris and I on LinkedIn, and let's connect and let's make this community stronger. But yeah, Vesna, definitely connect, and we'll get you your copy of your book. And then our other winner, active participant, way to go, Samantha Thompson. Woo! I love giving away free stuff, and I feel like I should get an applause button maybe. I should figure out how to do that and play around with this. So Samantha and Vesna, please reach out to me, and I'll try to connect with you and get you copies of your book. We'll just say thank you so much for sharing your time, not only with this interview, but also the time that you put into creating the book, and also understanding those billable hours. And as I can't imagine the hours that are put into this book, and so I think that this is again an incredibly timely book that I think that people should go out and get. When does it come out? It's coming out in the next
September 15th. It's next Tuesday. It will ship. So you
okay.
can order now from Princeton University Press or from Amazon.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to boot you off the screen here and wrap things up. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let's see if I can learn how to play with this. This is still what I'm doing. Okay, so again, congratulations on Vesna and Samantha for winning those. We'll get in touch and get you those copies of the book. And again, thank you, Chris, for being here. I gotta say, it has been such an experience leaving academia. One that I'm still struggling with. Like I'm still learning how to navigate that. For so long, I wanted to be a professor. I love teaching with a passion. And I was talking with my wife the other day, how heartbreaking for me to realize that one time I taught a few weeks ago before the spring quarter went online. That was the last time that I was going to be in front of a college classroom like that in that role. And that's hard to admit, but I think that it's important for us to realize that it's hard for everyone. And that COVID is really exposing a lot of what's going on in higher ed. And that I think that we have an opportunity to really talk about that in a candid way, as Vesna said, and just, we need to support each other. And I think that this is a great way that we can do that. And so thank you so much for those of you who are tuning in live. Thank you for those who are listening in. I'm planning on putting this out. This is going to be available on YouTube. And I'm also going to figure out how I can make this a podcast for those of you who love podcasts. I'm not a fan of producing podcasts because there's so much effort, but that's another topic for another day. We are going to be back next week, next Wednesday. We have a great lineup for you. I'm going to be putting out those promos here pretty soon. But we are going to be having a panel focusing specifically on what you want to do if you want to become an instructional designer in higher education. We have 3 great panelists. We have Laura Hoyer, Nicole. I'm going to mess this up and I practice with her. Her name is Nicole Papiano Laguara, and then Tamika Harris. And so I'm excited to have them joining us next week. And we're going to be doing the same things. Submit your questions, and you can win for this round. It's going to be a 30-minute coaching session with one of the panelists. And so and Samantha, you said I'm still teaching, and you're kind of making me cheery a little bit. I'm going to leave on that note. So thank you so much, everybody. Be a badass and just do your thing. Okay.